A team that did have a lot more going on in their offseason, that did get a few more fresher legs, was the Phoenix Suns, who made the most signings in free agency. Made like pretty much half their roster was added via free agency already. Probably still got a couple more moves to go on the fringes, but they were not quiet. They came off rip and made about 4 or 5 signings in the first hour. And although it's at minimum, guys, it's not the worst it probably could have been for them for a team that walked into free agency with absolutely zero depth.
Go ahead, Gabe. I want to hear what you got to say.
They had a lot of work to do, and I think they came out pretty well for the situation they were working with. Like, you know who your 4 main guys were going to be, as much as it's like 3.5 main guys, because don't even get me started on DeAndre Ayton. I could go on and on, but for having those 4 guys that have to build a roster out of basically nothing, I think that is solid. Like, I think Drew Eubanks is a very decent backup big to have, and Yuta Wantanabe, he's a shooter, bro. Like, he's not going to command that much defensive attention because he's probably going to be sharing the floor out of 2 of the 3 of Devin Booker, like Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal at any time he's on the court. So it's like a guy who shoots at that high of a clip while not commanding very much defensive attention because just so many other guys are commanding that and probably drawing double teams and leaving him open. It's like that helps their floor spacing and that can help their offense a lot. And then, I'm not going to sit here and say that guys like Keita Diop, Josh Okogie, like aren't super mid, but it's bodies to throw out there that'll play and at least give you some hustle, give you some defense, and just be guys that throw at the opposing team. Like Devin says, some fresh legs just to have out there. I think we said last season it was kind of their downfall in the playoffs is that everybody out their bench was just kind of mid. And I feel like this year everybody out their bench is still going to be pretty mid, but at least the star talent is a little bit boosted because I think Bradley Beal will play better than Chris Paul played last year in the postseason. And then at least these guys are fresh and they, there's enough here, I think, to go on a decent little postseason run. And for as much as I'm still not a fan of the Bradley Beal trade, they made it. That's in the past. And I think for having to build a roster with zero money, they did pretty all right.
Yes, we do read Chad Mills. This is an off season for the the nerds, for guys like us. Because if you see it on paper, you're like, who are these guys? Like, what kind of value would they bring? I think with the cards that they had, they didn't have much money. They did a pretty solid job. I think Yuta he's probably already their best like spot up shooter. Like right now, they didn't really have much spot up shooting last year, especially in the playoffs after they made all those trades. It was just very, very, very bad. They were relying on like guys like Torrey Craig and Josh Okogie to be like high level jump shooters, and that's asking a lot of those guys, especially when they're your best defenders. So I like that move a lot. Metu can provide a little bit more versatility in the front court, which they kind of lacked too. Very solid moves like bringing back Damion Lee. He played good for them in Spurs last year. That's fine. Okogie back. I like what he produced last season for them. It's just really the only thing I'm just still iffy on is like, what is their point guard situation looking like? Is it Book? Is Book going to be the guy? If so, I'm interested to see him as the lead guard all year long. That's going to be interesting because when he's played in like 8 to 10 game spurts, he's looked good, but that for a full season, that's a bigger workload. That means Bradley Beal is going to have to be healthy. Kevin Durant's going to have to be healthy, and those guys have to be ready to produce throughout the course of the season. So I'm interested to see that. And if it's not Book, if it's a campaign, then that's a small, 3-guard lineup and guys that are not really big-time defenders. I'm interested to see how that's going to look. So still a lot of questions, but for their offseason, for their signings, I feel like Phoenix did a pretty solid job.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think they did a solid job. The favorite signing that they made that I want to highlight is the Keita Diop signing, because if he can shoot the 3 the way he did last year, then the Suns might have their 5th starter in Keita Diop, or if nothing else, then probably their first guy off the bench. Someone who's always played with really good energy, rebounded fairly well, given you pretty good defense, and shot 39% from 3 last year. Now, given before then, his next best season was 33%. So I don't know how much we can depend on that, but if you can get even somewhere in the middle of that and he can shoot around 36% for this Suns team next year, that could be a very key signing for them on the wing. I think Eric Gordon plays a pretty good role for them off of the bench as well. had his moments that were more positive and less positive with the Clippers last year, but if nothing else, is going to be better than what the majority of their bench was last year, and is at least going to get them a few buckets from time to time, which no one was doing for them last year in the postseason. So for what they had, for their limited options, it was definitely a good free agency period for them. And I think it's certainly an improvement from where they were in the postseason just a couple of months ago to where they are today in terms of what's surrounding their core 3 to 4 guys.
I think the good thing is, like, even though I'm not the biggest Eric Gordon guy right now at this stage in his career, and like you said, like Kata, he had the good shooting year last season, but before that, he's like below average 3-point shooter. Those guys are going to be getting a lot of open looks because the amount of attention that Book and KD were already commanding, and say what you want about Bradley Beal, he's still a borderline all-star guard. These guys are going to be getting a lot of open looks. So it's just a matter of making and missing the shots pretty much because Okogie, Kata Bates, Yuta, these guys are going to be getting some really good looks all year long. So, you know, the opportunity is there for them to be high-level shooters because they're going to get a lot of those shots.
Yeah, it's just going to – I think the make or break for this team is just going to be how effective some of these new signings can be on the defensive end because we know this team is going to be good on the offensive side of the floor. That was kind of a given no matter who they sign just because when you have 3 offensive superstars of that caliber – 2 offensive superstars and Bradley Beal's above average, not to slander too heavily, but like they were going to be fine on that end. It's just really going to be like if Kata Bates Diop and Josh Okogie can hit these shots, that will be huge because they need their defense on the court desperately without having them be exposed and just completely ruin the floor spacing.
Beal's still really good, Gabe. Don't be too harsh on the guy, man. He's still really good.
Yeah, but I said 3 superstar, and I'm like, okay, I can't call Bradley Beal a superstar.
He's an all-star level offensive player these days.
All-star and superstar are 2 very different things.
Very different, true, but it's better production offensively outside of playmaking than what Chris Paul has been providing for them. Like they're definitely more explosive, and Beal's gonna garner a lot more just like shot creation and attention defensively than Chris Paul has this past like year and a half or so.
True. Book has to be back in his like bubble bag, basically. I feel like that like 1920 year, he was pretty much transitioning into that like basically lead playmaker role for them. But then they got Chris Paul down. He could just focus on what his strong suit was. So it's good he has some of that experience already if he does have to take on that burden. And when a fair amount of your passes are going to go to Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, like I can't imagine facilitating on this roster being that hard of a job. However, spoon-feeding DeAndre Ayton into being productive, that might be a little bit more tall of a task.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes. It would definitely help if Campaign looks like a good backup point guard again as well, but that was definitely not something we saw for the majority of last season. So hopefully the point guard play is not too lackluster for the Suns, but that could be something they look to address via trade or in the buyout market later on in the season. But trade options are limited considering they literally don't own a pick until the 2030s. So we'll see how that one goes.